What's up? I wanted to show you guys something about the hover drill and kind of how you can mess up the hover drill. I've seen that a lot on Twitter lately, and I think that it has a lot of value. But I wanted to just kind of point out a couple things that could make your hover drill not effective. So we have a couple side views of some pretty elite hitters here. This is Baseball Swingopedia. It's an awesome follow on Instagram. This is one of Ordur's home runs here from the season. I'm just going to let this play. And then once he gets to landing, I'm going to pause it. Okay, cool. So I can't really draw on the screen on this one because I'm just screen sharing right now. But I want you to look at his back foot and his front foot and see the position that they're in here. And you'll notice that when he's at landing, they're both on angles. So his front leg, if I drew a line from his foot to his hip, just imagine that I drew a line right there. And I drew another line from his back foot to his back hip. Let's imagine I drew another line right there. You can see that they're wider than his hips. And there's a bone that goes right across like his belt buckle here that's called your pelvis. You probably know what that is. But essentially that's like the engine to your swing, and we really want to turn our pelvis in the most efficient way possible. So the only way that we can really do that in a good way is to have our hips wider than our shoulders, our feet wider than our hips. And you'll kind of see that he has kind of like an A frame with his hip or with his feet here. And what that does is it creates a force vector to be able to turn his pelvis. So if you think about the way that your leg is set up here, because it's on an angle, your front leg and your back leg, for that matter, they have both horizontal and vertical components. So let's say that his leg, just making numbers up here, but let's say that the distance from his foot to his hip in the vertical, so like right up here, kind of like across the edge of the dugout, you can kind of see that vertical line right there from here to here, his foot, all the way up to here. Let's say that that's 3 feet high. I don't know what the actual number is. I'm just making it up. But let's say that it's 3 feet high. So we know that in the Y direction, his leg has a 3-foot vertical component. And now let's just imagine that in the X direction, so that would mean from on the ground, essentially, so going from his foot where my mouse is here to where his hip would be, right here where his hip would attach to his pelvis and his leg would attach to his pelvis like this. Okay, let me rephrase that. The hip is part of the pelvis, but you can kind of see here the distance from foot to where the leg connects to the pelvis here. Let's just say that that's another 3 feet. Once again, I'm making that up, but let's just pretend. So his leg would have 3 in the Y direction and 3 in the X direction. And since you want the hips to rotate this way, and most of their rotation is done in the horizontal direction, the thing that we really need from this front leg and from this back leg is horizontal component. So if my front leg is out front of my hip like this and on an angle, then we know that our front leg has horizontal components. And we know that if our back foot is back closer to the catcher than our back hip, we know that the back leg also has horizontal components. So that way we can kind of pull with our obliques here with our back leg, and we can kind of push with our front leg here, which will stabilize our body in our turn and really rotate our pelvis efficiently. And you'll see that that's what Odur does here. By the way, Baseball Swingopedia is great. You should definitely give them a follow. So take a look and see how he kind of rotates around his spine, and his pelvis just turns, which turns the rest of his body as well. So you can kind of see that his head stayed pretty still there, and you'll notice that he really pushes through his front heel. You'll see his front foot kind of pop up there, which really manipulates his lean. And none of this would happen if he was stacked up on his back leg. So when I say stacked up, I mean if he had no force vector on his back leg, if his back leg was just straight up and down. When I say force vector, I mean horizontal force vector. If his back leg was stacked straight up and down as I'm moving my mouse here like this, then what would end up happening is that he would have no, nothing to leverage the rotation of his pelvis because of the angles of his leg. And you'll see this with just about every single major league hitter. Now, if you were just to stand with both your feet underneath your hips, so you were straight up and down, like let's say that, get to landing one more time here. Okay, let's say that you landed and your foot was right under here and right under here. You wouldn't be able to turn your pelvis very well because you couldn't use ground force to help you, and that's the purpose of the force vector of our legs. So let's just look at a couple more hitters here, and you'll kind of see how they accomplish that, and then I'll kind of circle back a little bit and talk about how you can mess up the hover drill in this. Okay, so this is Jose Abreu, and you'll see as he gets to landing, really nice force vectors in his legs as well. Hold on, let me show you again. Boom, so that front foot is way out in front of his front hip, and his back foot is way behind his back hip, and because of that, those angles allow him to leverage his pelvis, and you'll see that in pitchers as well, because pitchers need to leverage their pelvis as well. So when he lands like this, what he's really doing is allowing himself to use the ground to stop this hip from moving forward and really leverage it back the other way, which is then going to start his kinetic chain and allow him to turn around his spine like so. And you'll see that with just about everyone. So you can see that in this video right here, you can see Simeon, he has that knee stacked right over his foot, kind of like as I was talking about, which is bad, but you'll see him move out of this. So he lands with those nice force vectors as well. So if you do the hover drill, one second, let me get back to Simeon, okay? If you do the hover drill and you get stuck right in this position right here, and you do all of your swing motion from here, your foot still has to come down to here before you can even start. So all of this pre-motion here that he has is something that he does on every pitch regardless of whether it's going to be a strike or not. So you want to be able to do the hover drill, but you're really only controlling the start of your forward move, because you'll see with almost every single major league hitter, what they're doing is they're holding their forward move back rather than swinging right from their hover. They're holding their forward move back for as long as they can. And someone who does this really, really well is Josh Donaldson. So if you're interested, certainly take a look at a video of him. It actually might be right up here. Let me see if I can grab one. And you'll see other hitters, when the guys that toe tap, someone like Murphy, he's not really that big a toe tapper, but you'll kind of see, yeah, he is a toe tapper. So you'll see him, the way that he's holding that kind of forward move back, he's just using his front foot. So he's using the hover drill kind of like this. So he kind of uses his front leg to help him with the hover drill, which is very, very much equivalent to really holding yourself with your back hip, which is the thing that the hover drill kind of teaches. But you'll notice that the way he toe taps, he already has his legs outside his hips, so that way he can leverage that pelvis. And really, Murphy lands a little bit skinnier than I would usually like, but obviously he's super successful at it. And one of the reasons that I'm not a huge fan of landing with your legs kind of skinny like this is that the angle from your foot to your hip is pretty vertical, which can result in hitters not leaning back quite far enough. Now you'll see that Murphy leans back a pretty solid angle, but if he was leaning back just a little bit further, right, like this, he would hit the ball consistently higher. But for his body weight, his launch angle is really, really good. So obviously there's nothing to change for Murphy, and he's really smart about the way he does his swing. Let me see if I can find Donaldson here so I can kind of show you how he controls that. Now there's other guys that have a much shorter step that don't really control that move very much at all. Like Griffey would be a good example. He just has really good timing with when he starts, and he can also control his landing. So there's a bunch of different controls that you can kind of have in your swing. I know there's a Donaldson one here. I've been on this page a lot. Let me find it. Give me 1 second. But if you have really, really good timing of when you lift up your leg, then your ability to kind of control how fast you move forward isn't as important, but you do want to be able to control your landing if you land too soon. So if you look at video of Griffey hitting an off-speed pitch, which is on YouTube, you can just YouTube that and you'll find it. You'll kind of see a perfect example of what should happen if you land too early. If you look at Donaldson here, what you'll kind of see is that he kind of shows the pitcher his butt a little bit. And what that really is a counter rotation of his hips. So he's kind of flexing his back hip a lot. Oh, okay. So this is just the swing. Sorry, I didn't realize I was going to show the side view. Maybe we got this one. Maybe I'll show the side view here as well. Okay, cool. So here we go. And it's a bummer about Instagram is I can't back it up. Give me 1 sec. Alright, so right here at the top of his kick, he can hold this for a little longer. So his hover drill is really at the top. And really that's what's happening with the hover drill, is that if you kick, your hover drill is at the top of your kick. If you don't kick, then your hover drill is much closer to the ground. So you're really just controlling when you begin your forward momentum. So if you can have enough power to hover drill close to the ground, then it's a good idea to, be able to do that. But some guys need to be able to generate more momentum with the leg kick, and leg kicking can help with timing as well, which Donaldson has seen a lot of success with, and so has guys like Jose Bautista. So when he gets his leg up here, he can hold it a little longer, and he's been quoted talking about this as well. So that's on the interwebs somewhere. So definitely try to grab that and take a look at it if you're interested. But he does a tremendous job of being able to kind of delay that kick more, so that way he can wait longer on pitches. So that's kind of his hover drill. But there's another kind of component as well that's really that can be really useful as well. So let me kind of dig that up. Okay, right here. So take a look how Griffey, as he's stepping, he gets into his landing. You'll see him kind of sink into his knee. So this is like another like kind of check that hitters can have to be able to hit off speed pitches. And some hitters are much better at this landing, which is like what Griffey does. And guys like Jamie Savalas will call this like secondary cushion. I've heard Baseball Rebellion call it like hitting pause. It really doesn't matter what you call it. It basically is the ability to land your front foot and not pull the trigger right away. So Griffey lands, he kind of waits, and some people might look at this and be like, oh, well, he's getting his foot down early. But if you look at other pitches that aren't curveballs, so if we kind of go back, that one he kind of lands a little bit early as well. So pause it. Okay, here we go. Out of the hand, lands, and then triggers. Okay. And then this other one, see how early he lands. The ball's not even close to being there yet. And then he triggers. But on other pitches, he goes really, really quickly. As soon as his foot lands, he triggers like on that one. So what you'll see is that some guys are really, really good at controlling their leg at the top. Some guys are really, really good at controlling their leg at the bottom. But at the end of the day, you've got to have a secondary control, so that way pitchers, when they try to mistime you, you kind of have a way to foil that. And some are much better at the control of the step, and some are much better at the control of when you actually pull the trigger in your swing. So you've got to have one. You've got to be really good at one of them to be able to be a really successful major league hitter. And I'm not recommending one or the other. Your ability to maintain power in your swing, what I would say is that you'd want to be really, really good at the one where you're controlling your load, but you can't always be perfect at that. And a lot of guys that spend a lot of time on trying to control how well their load or how good their load is, and neglect to control what happens after they land. What ends up happening with those guys is they rack up a bunch of big strikeout numbers. So keep that in mind as you're moving forward. I think that this whole like hitting revolution on the internet has been awesome, and obviously it's benefited me a ton as well, because I've learned a lot just from being online and looking at stuff. But it's important to understand that in your swing, you've got to have a couple checks to be able to kind of control that timing. So for Griffey, like we were just talking about, so here's Griffey, right? So for Griffey, his best control was when he lands like this. He would basically hold this position or drift into his front knee a little bit more and then trigger on off-speed pitches. For guys like Donaldson, guys like Judge, the way that they adjust with off-speed pitches is they really sink into their back hip more. But if you can do both, that's ideal. And someone like Donaldson usually is able to do both. I've certainly seen him land and sink into his front leg a little bit as well. But it takes a lot of motor control in a really short time window to be able to execute that in an awesome way. So I thought this would be a really good thing for you guys to take a look at. And the thing that you want to be really cognizant of when you're working on something like the hover drill is that you've got to be able to get your legs and slide your hips, so that way your feet are outside your hips when you land. So you'll see Griffey here, foot outside his hip, foot outside his hip. Now, if in any circumstance this foot ends up underneath the hip when he lands here, what will end up happening is most likely his body will select to push with his back leg, his head will move forward, and it'll create a ton of other problems. Or if he actually goes to sequence right, he won't be able to leverage the turn of his pelvis very well, so his swing will be a lot slower, which would make him have to decide to swing earlier and would create a whole host of other problems. So when you're doing the hover drill, make sure that you're able to still land with your feet outside your hips, because if you don't, then you're cooked. If you like this video, please subscribe to my page. All that stuff, I really, really appreciate it. So if you happen to have any questions for me, feel free to leave a comment or shoot me an email at kurt@ignitebaseball.org. It's actually right up here. See it right there on the top of my window. If you guys have questions, I'm always happy to answer them. I'll talk to you soon.